Welcome back to another episode of the Dream Support Podcast. My name is Micah Foster. I am the co-founder and co-owner, along with my wife, of Dream Support LLC, a remote executive assistant agency. Today, I want to give you a resource. We've been talking to people. I've been interviewing people in the recent podcast releases. Today, I want to give you a resource. It's one that I found out about just recently, and I think it's going to have really profound impact in the future of how I do some of my work. And I think it could have an impact in yours, or it could impact the way that you work with a remote executive assistant and release some of this kind of stuff to them as well. So I want to share with you a resource. Of course, it's an AI resource, as all the new things are these days, but this is one called Notebook LM. It's a Google product. So the website is notebooklm.google.com. And here, if you're watching on YouTube, I'll walk you through the website, but I'll kind of talk about it as I go for anyone just listening. So here's the site. It is just notebooklm.google.com. And they label it an experiment. So think about like notebooks, right? In general. So maybe it was a college course or a high school course or something. You had to have a notebook for each of these subjects. So you're sort of creating a notebook for a subject matter, and you're creating a subject matter centralized location of information that you can search with and do things with inside of Notebook LM. So let me just show you what I've done here. This is a notebook I've called Dream Support. All I've done is fed it some different information, or sources as they call it. I fed it our website, dreamsupport.club, which is pretty generic, just some simple information about us. And then I fed it 17 interviews with clients from YouTube links. So you can feed PDFs, audio files, links to YouTube, websites, Excel files, just all different kinds of source information, and then it builds a notebook. So now, unlike a physical notebook where you're writing down and there's no searchable way, you've just got to kind of know where things are. This you can interact with, you can chat with it like you could a GPT. But in addition, you can generate things quickly. Like you can generate a FAQ doc very quickly, which we've done right here, which is general information about Dream Support and what people might ask about that. You can generate a study guide. So think about if this was a subject matter that you're going to have a test on, you're in school, you could generate a study guide very simply, or a table of contents, or a timeline of events, or a briefing doc. All different, very helpful things. And then there's this one thing, and this is why I even came on this site today in the first place, because I saw someone else do this with something. They generated a podcast on the subject. So basically, it reads everything, listens or watches the videos very quickly within a matter of minutes. All of this is searchable. And then I said, generate a discussion. And it's basically two AI voices. These are not real people. In a conversational way, they are talking to one another about the subject matter, which happens to be Dream Support. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually play for you the file. It's 10 and a half minutes. And then at the very end, I'll kind of offer some comments about that. It's not 100% accurate, and feel free to skip to the end if you want to. But this is a AI-generated podcast. So how appropriate that I would set this up. I wanted to use it in some way, but I want to be truthful about what it is. This is AI generated based on these interviews and our website. That's all I gave it. No further instruction. And then I said generate. And this is what it came up with. Enjoy.
Ever feel like you're juggling chainsaws while riding a unicycle on a tightrope?
Oh, is that all?
Right?
Yeah.
It's like the story of our lives, am I right?
Always.
Well, today's deep dive, it's for anyone who's ever wished for a little more breathing room, in their life.
A little more space.
Yes, space. And no, not talking about like escaping to a desert island.
Though tempting.
Right. Although tempting. We're talking about virtual assistants.
Yes.
Specifically through a company called Dream Support. So we've got a ton of interviews
You do?
with Dream Support clients.
Yeah. Pastors, therapists, entrepreneurs, you name it, we probably have it, all sharing their experience.
It's interesting because I was going to say, it seems like a lot of people use Dream Support.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is what jumped out at me from these interviews is this kind of unexpected theme of unlocking potential.
Oh. Interesting.
Like almost having a VA isn't just about get this off my plate, do this thing. It's about you are then making space for something bigger.
Totally. And I think there's a psychology to that, which is that when we delegate effectively, it allows for kind of, like you said, space for creativity,
Uh-huh.
like a mental decluttering in a way
Yeah.
that then allows us to be more present, not just in our work life, but also in our personal life.
Okay. So it's more than just like checking things off the to-do list.
Right.
We're talking about like a fundamental shift in how we approach our time and energy.
Totally.
Okay, got it. But what does that actually look like in practice?
Sure. So I think and we have a lot of really great stories and examples.
Yeah, let's hear it.
But Pastor Stephen, I think, is a really great example of someone who, he's a pastor at his church. He was so used to doing it all himself,
Yeah.
carrying the weight of everything,
Mm-hmm.
that he didn't realize how much it was actually holding him back.
And it's interesting too. He was one of the people who was like, I can't believe I didn't do this sooner. I was so mad at myself. Because it's almost like we've been conditioned to think, I should be able to do it all.
Yes. So
Like asking for help is a weakness or something.
Totally. And I think what he found, and this is something that a lot of people find when they finally do start to delegate and kind of release that control, is that they actually have more time and energy for those bigger picture things. Like he had all of these goals for his church that he never had time for. And so he was finally able to tackle those.
Mm-hmm. It's like that saying, slow is fast, fast is slow. You let go of the urgent to focus on the important, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's funny how those urgent things, they feel so important.
Oh, totally.
But when you actually get some space,
Mm-hmm.
you're like, oh, I don't even need to be doing that.
Right.
Someone else can help with that.
Yeah.
And then we have Jamal, who he's a therapist. And so he really struggled with that do-it-yourself mentality. He's like, I'm a therapist, like I should be able to handle everything.
It's so true, though. I think so many people listening are like, oh my gosh, that's me. It's like
Fine.
that's the lie we tell ourselves. I think everybody listening can relate to that.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
And so he actually had this aha moment where he was just like, wait, if I actually invest in some support, then it's not even just about freeing up my time, but it's also freeing up that mental and emotional capacity, which, as a therapist, I mean, talk about the people you need to show up for.
You got to be on.
Yeah, you have to be on. And so it's just really interesting how much this theme of delegation, it's not just about doing less. It's about making space to do more of what matters.
Right. And speaking of space, we have to talk about Erin because she had this great way. She was describing, her VA. She was like, she's my second brain.
Oh, I love that.
Isn't that good? And I was like, it's so true because it really is like this extension of you that's helping you stay organized. That's helping you, process things, brainstorm, all the things that when it's all in your head, it's just like,
Overwhelm. It can be very overwhelming.
Right.
And Erin talked about, she's like, I always just have this running to-do list in my head.
Right.
And she's like, it stresses me out because I just feel like I'm going to forget something.
And it's not just for like remembering tasks. It's for processing, brainstorming solutions, like all the things that when it's swirling around in your head.
Totally. And I think, too, overwhelm, it can really like stifle creativity.
Yeah.
But when we free up that mental space, that's when the magic happens.
That's when the magic happens.
And speaking of magic,
Yes.
Betsy is a great example of what I like to call the Costa Rica effect of working with a VA.
Okay, the Costa Rica effect. Does this involve sandy beaches and like tropical cocktail? Because if so, I am so in.
Well, not cocktails on the beach, but definitely a sense of expanded possibilities.
Okay, I like it.
So Betsy, she always had this dream of like having this big launch party for her book. She had this book coming out.
Okay.
But she was so in the weeds of her day-to-day that she had almost like resigned herself to, okay, we're just going to do a small little thing locally.
Right.
And then she started working with a VA and was able to kind of get so organized and efficient that it opened up that space for her to actually create the launch party that she had always envisioned.
So she's in Costa Rica right now.
Well, not in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
Yet. She did say that it did kind of open up that like feeling of possibility of like, oh, now that I have support in this area of my life,
Right.
maybe I can. She's even toying with the idea of doing like a book tour with a stop in Costa Rica.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's amazing how much kind of that feeling of possibility can expand when you're not carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders.
Yeah. And it's like, it's not just about getting the things done. It's about how can you create a life where you actually have this space to live your dreams. And it seems like that's what a lot of people are finding. Like, I mean, we heard from pastors who finally had time to write that book that they've always wanted to write, entrepreneurs launching new businesses, like people rediscovering passions. Like it was very much this theme of, oh, I can actually.
Yeah, like things they had put on hold for years sometimes.
Yeah.
And, I think it's a good reminder that it's not just about doing more, it's about aligning your actions with your values, with what you actually want to be spending your time on. And that sometimes requires letting go of that control, letting go of the I can do it all myself mentality.
Now let's get real for a second. Dream support sounds amazing. It's not a magic bullet.
Okay.
Right? Like it's not just going to magically transform you into, a productivity ninja.
Right. It does require a certain level of self-awareness and kind of willingness to let go and to really kind of embrace this new way of working. And I think that's something that a lot of the clients we spoke to talked about was this element of mindset. You have to be ready to do this.
Yeah. It's like anything else that's worth doing. Right.
Yeah.
It's going to take a little effort, but the payoff is huge. So for our listeners who are maybe feeling a little intrigued, but maybe a little hesitant, what are some questions that people can ask themselves to kind of figure out, okay, is this right for me?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think first and foremost, it's, am I really spending my time on the highest value work?
Right.
Like the work that only I can do?
Yes.
Or am I bogged down in tasks that really someone else could be taking care of?
Like Pastor James, who was talking about how so much of his time was being eaten up by administrative tasks.
Right.
Like managing the church database, creating social media graphics, like important stuff, but not necessarily the best use of his particular gifts and experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And he found that by delegating those tasks, he actually had more time to do the things that only he could do.
Right.
Which was, preach on Sundays and connect with this congregation and lead the church.
Right. And that's where that term evergreen activities comes into play, right?
Yeah.
These are the tasks that they got to happen every week,
Yep.
every month.
Yes.
But they don't necessarily require you.
Right.
You've got a whole team of specialists almost that are ready to just tackle those evergreen activities so you don't have to.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be a whole team, right? It could be one person a few hours a week. But just think about what are those things that just drain your energy, take up your focus. What if those were taken care of consistently and reliably?
Yeah. And I think what's interesting, too, is that so many of the people we heard from talked about this feeling of being stuck almost before they started working with Dream Support.
Yeah.
Like they knew they were capable of more.
Right.
But there was just like this
Spinning their wheels.
spinning your wheels.
Working hard, but not necessarily
Not getting anywhere.
moving forward. Yeah.
And then across the board, pastors, therapists, entrepreneurs, like everybody had the same experience, which was this feeling of almost like liberation.
Yeah.
Like they didn't realize how heavy that burden was until they actually let go of it.
And I think there's something too about like giving ourselves permission to not have to do it all, to step into our full potential. And I think that looks different for everybody, Maybe it's in our work life, maybe it's in our personal life, maybe it's in both. But
it's about having the space to actually...
to figure out what that looks like.
And isn't that what it's all about? It's like, how do we create a life where we have the space and the energy and the support to truly thrive?
Totally. And I think what we've learned from all these amazing dream support stories, it's that it's not just about achieving more, right? It's about experiencing more joy, more fulfillment, and ultimately more freedom in the process.
So good. So as you're reflecting on kind of everything that we've unpacked today, what are those areas of your life where maybe you could benefit from a little bit more support, a little bit more breathing room,
Absolutely.
a little bit more you?
Yeah. And I think that's such a good question to ask. And remember, you don't have to figure it all out at once.
Right.
Just start small, experiment, see what unfolds, because you might be surprised at what you discover.
Because sometimes the most profound transformations begin with a single courageous step. Thanks for diving in with us today.
Okay. So that's pretty wild that I didn't give it any prompt. I just fed it some sources and pressed create. and within like a couple of minutes, that audio file was created. Now, obviously, there's some little things in there. They're not how I would put them, or they use the term virtual assistant. We don't use that wording, though some clients have in some of those videos, which is where I picked that up. But we are a remote executive assistant agency, and so obviously it's not perfect, but it's pretty amazing. So if you're interested in checking out that technology, I think there's a lot of use cases for it, not only for the audio sort of summary podcast thing, but also just for creating notebooks of information that is searchable, that you can create outlines and do real work with. It's a powerful tool. So I encourage you to check it out. Notebooklm.google.com. Not sponsored, no affiliate links, nothing like that. But just wanted to share the resource with you. God bless, and I'll see you next time.